Hey everyone, glad to be here with all of you tonight. We're going to have yet another great late night chat. Yeah, let's do it. Here we go.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome everybody. I'm glad that I'm here with all of you tonight, here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment. And yeah, we're just going to have a normal live stream tonight. If you've got a question for the second half of the show, you can send your question in via Rumble Rants. Cash at me at CalebMoppin22. The best way to send your question is buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee /Caleb Moppin. Very straight up, very awesome. All you have to do is, go there, send in a question. It's a really great way to send a question for the second half of the show. So first my opening remarks, then the roll call, and then I answer your questions for the second half of the show. Announcements, New Jersey, January 11th. We're going to kick off the new year with a Center for Political Innovation event. It's going to be an all-day event, 2 p.m. to 9 p.m. There'll be a dinner buffet for everybody. There will be music, speeches, a long interactive Q&A session. It's going to be really, really great. There'll be some guests there. We're going to honor some important New Jersey activists, as well as, just give an update on different things. It's going to be a great, great New Year's event, January 11th. The Earth is awakening. America should join. So be there. You can register on Eventbrite to be there at the event in New Jersey on January the 11th. Sign up. We would love to have you there. Yeah. So other than that, as I said, I will be answering questions. The second half of the show is all you guys. It is me answering your questions. So send in questions for the second half of the show. You can ask me about whatever you want. Usually we talk about politics. Tonight we're talking about movies, but you can ask me whatever you want. Buy me a coffee is by far the best way to send your questions for the second half of the show. So buy me a coffee, ask me questions for the second half of the show. And yeah, tonight, I thought I'd just talk to you all about movies. I have obviously consumed many movies in my time, as I'm sure many of you watching have. I mean, who knows? Maybe there's an Amish person watching who's never seen a movie, but why are you now looking at YouTube? That wouldn't make any sense. But movies are important. And, I'm just going to give you some thoughts on different movies and different aspects of movies, what we can learn from them and all of that. I wanted to start out with, I was a kid in the 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, before 9/11. And during those years, there were a lot of family comedy movies that everybody saw. Home Alone, Mrs. Doubtfire, Hook. Oh my goodness, there were just so many of them. Air Bud. I think Air Bud was a little bit later. And that there were these like family movies. The 101 Dalmatians movie, not the cartoon that came out earlier, but the live action one. There were these like family movies that were like family comedy movies that everybody watched. Everybody saw those movies. And you think about those movies had particular themes that, for example, they tended to be about very rich people, suburban rich white people, right? The movie Home Alone, for example, that house is huge, the house they live in. And the whole premise of the film is that this whole huge family with so many kids and aunts and uncles, they're all flying to Paris for the holidays. The whole big family is flying to France to spend the holiday in France, and they leave the kid behind. It's about very, very, very wealthy people. But it doesn't seem to really acknowledge that. It's just kind of like, that's how you should be. And a lot of these 90s movies are like that. They're about very, very wealthy, white suburban people living their lives. And amid all this wealth and luxury, they have family problems. And what's noted is the people don't think of themselves as wealthy if you watch these movies. It's just portrayed as that's normal. That's what normal people do. Normal people live in really fancy houses and take the whole family to Paris for the holidays. And, you watch it, right? You watch these 90s family comedy films, very, very wealthy, rich white people who have a huge amount of wealth, and that's just normal. That's what you're just supposed to do. They're not portrayed as being wealthy, right? They don't know that they're rich. That's just what normal Americans do. And normal Americans happen to be rich white suburbanites. And on top of that, there's a huge amount of family pain. There's divorce. There's kids and parents not getting along and being estranged from each other. And it's like, amid the comedy, the family comedy or whatever, there's this underlying pain of like, families aren't close anymore. We don't love each other anymore. And a lot of 90s movies fit this criteria, right? I think Liar, Liar, the movie Liar, Liar with Jim Carrey is like this. You watch those movies, and it's interesting because the part about everyone being wealthy, that is very much propaganda. I mean, that was a huge part of winning the Cold War. And you go around the world, many people in the developing world think that all Americans live lives of luxury, right? They watch American television and they see the very luxurious lives that a lot of TV Americans live, especially like reality television nowadays, Real Housewives of New Jersey, stuff like that. And they assume that all Americans live that way. And they don't, right? I mean, there's obviously big chunks of America that don't live that way. In fact, at this point, most of America by far is not living that way. But in the 90s, the US economy was a bit stronger. And of course, they're not showing you Appalachia. They're not showing the impoverished urban African-American community. They're not showing Chicanos. They're not showing, Southern poor white people. They're not showing rural folks. It's just focused on like wealthy suburban Americans. And while they have all this luxury and wealth, they're lonely and they're having family problems and parents aren't there for their kids and there's ugly divorces and all of that. That's a really, really common theme in 90s movies. Part of it is just that the people who make movies tend to be wealthy, right? That's just kind of an ugly reality of the film industry. The people who write movies, the people who act in movies, the people who direct movies, they're all very rich. And so if they're going to make a movie about what they know, it's about very rich people. And you watch that, but that is a really consistent theme, those big, kind of comedy family films of the 90s. But another thing about that time period is that it's very different from today, is that movies back then, and if there's anyone older than me on here, they can probably relate to this even more than I can. Movies were a point of common reference in that everybody watched the same movies. Nowadays, with your computer, you can watch whatever you want, right? Netflix gives you many options. Cable has hundreds of channels. But you go further back in recent history, right? There were only a few channels on the television, and there were only a few movies in the movie theater, and you had the options that were there. And so when a movie like The Lion King came out from Disney, I remember that. Everybody talked about The Lion King. Every kid went to see The Lion King. If you were at school, your teacher would reference The Lion King when trying to teach you math. When you were in church, the pastor in his sermon would reference The Lion King to try and make a point about the Bible. Everybody would reference The Lion King. Everyone was kind of on the same page because The Lion King was all there was, right? And even if you didn't go to see it, if you watched a television, if you watched television, you were going to see an ad for the Lion King. Everyone was singing lines from the Lion King. It was like the Lion King was a point of reference. This ABC or this Disney film, right? And it was like that. Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast and the Lion King. They were all like points of common reference. You don't have that nowadays. Yeah, people see the same kind of movies and stuff, but it's not the same. Right? It was like all of society would be focused on one thing. There was kind of this point of common reference that you got from the big movies back in those days. You don't have that now. You don't have that in the same way. And that there were certain movies that everyone saw. I will say that at one point in my life, I was a senior in high school, and I had a job. I worked in a bookstore. I worked in a bookstore on weeknights, and I had my Sundays free. And in my little town, there was a movie theater, a small town movie theater that had 2 screens. And every Sunday, I would go to the movies in my little town. And I was a senior in high school, and it was just something I did to pass the time every Sunday, my senior year of high school. I went to the movies every Sunday. And the movie theater in my town only had 2 screens. It was pretty cheap. It was not that expensive. It was like maybe $6.50 to go to the movies, which maybe was quite a deal. And I would go and I would see every movie because they had 2 screens. And they would get a new movies every 2 weeks. And so I would see the one movie they had the first week, and I would see the next movie they had the second week. And I would watch anything, right? And it was just something I did my senior year. I had money to spend. I could walk to the movie theater from my house. It was a long walk. It was, like a 45-minute to an hour stroll. And I would walk to the movie theater, and I would eat popcorn, and I would watch whatever movies were at the movie theater. And in a way, I appreciate having done that. The year I graduated from high school was 2006. So this was 2005, the fall of 2005, and the spring of 2006. I saw every movie that came to this tiny little 2-screen movie theater in my little town. And I learned a lot by watching this. They would not get high art films, right? They didn't have French foreign films and documentaries. No. This was whatever they would show at this tiny little town movie theater. And it tended to be family movies, cartoons for kids, or comedies, or action films, basically. And I saw every one of them. And I sat there in the movie theater on Sunday by myself, eating popcorn, and I watched them. And I gained a lot of insight by watching every movie that came about. First of all, during this time, George W. Bush was still the president of the United States. And I was in a very conservative area. The area I was in was very Republican, very evangelical. But I noticed by going to the movies and I was not seeing activist films. I wasn't seeing political movies. I was watching kids' movies. I think the movie Robots came out. I watched Robots. I watched RV, starring Robin Williams. I watched Fun with Dick and Jane with Jim Carrey. What else? I watched Wedding Crashers. Wedding Crashers with Keith Flesher. Is that who that was? Keith, or Heath or somebody like that. Wedding Crashers and Fun with Dick and Jane and RV and Robots and these were not like films that were written by French existentialists or something, right? These were just very, very run-of-the-mill films. There was one film that I saw, and it was Steve Martin. Steve Martin played this like father, and it was like his kids were normal and had problems, and there was like this perfect family. I think it was called Family Camp or something like that, right? And it was like Steve Martin was this like normal dad, and he was like competing with this like high achieving perfect family, or something, or something like that, right? or no, I think it's Cheaper by the Dozen 2. I think, yeah, Cheaper by the Dozen 2 is the name of it. I watched that one. And I watched all these films, and I noticed that there were certain themes that came up in those films that you could kind of get a flavor for the politics of the United States during these years. For example, I noticed that there was kind of a vague anti-corporate populism in a lot of these films. An RV, right? Even though it's about a family renting an RV and driving across the country, it's one of these like family comedies, but there's still like this anti-corporatism. Like it's like a big chain is trying to take over a company and the small business guy. And Fun with Dick and Jane was about Enron, and it's about like this wealthy couple who become bank robbers after they like get all their money lost from Enron. And it's got kind of a like a wild outlaw, vigilante, outlaw kind of Robin Hood theme to it. And that even Robots, I remember I watched the movie Robots, which was this kid's cartoon. And in Robots, the evil corporation is trying to convince people that they need to buy their products by saying, why be you when you can be new? Right. I remember that. Right. And then the heroes, they run a company, a robot company, and their slogan is see a need, fill a need. Right. And so it's like this evil company that makes people feel bad and makes them have to buy new products to look good versus the heroes that say see a need, fill a need, and they're just trying to be nice. Right. And it was almost like vaguely, kind of anti-capitalist or socialistic or anti-corporate. Right. It was the greedy capitalist who's trying to create needs that aren't there, and the people that just want to produce for the good of the company or the good of the community or something like that. And that I mean, you could kind of sense the Obama thing was going to start soon. The Obama thing really didn't get going for maybe 2 years after that. But Bush had already been in office. Hurricane Katrina had happened, and the Iraq War was happening. It was quite unpopular, and Europe was mad at the United States, and the seeds of Obamaism, right, and the Obama thing were already being planted. I kind of picked up on that at the movies. I would sit there and eat the popcorn, and I would watch this, and yeah, it was quite interesting. Now, there are certain things that you'll notice when it comes to the politics of American movies. For example, 1980s movies are all very patriotic, right? And that's a really common theme in 1980s movies, right? You watch 1980s movies, right? You get like comedy. There's a lot of these comedy films in the 1980s with like Chevy Chase and John Belushi and Chris Farley and all of that. And they're like kind of vaguely funny, a lot of physical comedy and all of that. And then they end, instead of having just regular credits, right, they pan over the characters, and the guy like smiles when they put his name on the screen. And the military are like the heroes, right? And the military is good, and the Soviet communists are bad. And it's kind of like this kind of like go military, go frat boy fraternity, physical comedy, drink beer and get lots of girls, right? You think about Animal House, you think about Stripes. And they're positive movies. They're not pessimistic, but they're also they're oddly militaristic, oddly patriotic. And, the comedy has a serious underlying patriotic, join the military message. Spies Like Us. That was a movie that came out during that period. A lot of these people that started out in Saturday Night Live, they would make these kind of like physical comedy movies that were funny and adventurous, but also had this kind of underlying patriotic message. There's a movie from the early 90s that I did not see until later. I was too young to see it when it came out. But the movie Forrest Gump, that movie served a very, very political purpose. Forrest Gump that was almost on the level of like in a communist country, the great leader, writes a book to like summarize the previous decades. Forrest Gump, it may have looked just like a silly comedy about a mentally challenged guy from the South, but it was very, very much summarizing the Cold War for America. It starts out in the 50s. It ends in the 90s with the AIDS crisis. And this, Tom Hanks plays this mentally retarded guy from the South who kind of stumbles through the civil rights movement, Elvis, the Vietnam War, the 70s, all of that, Apple, and it's in the guise of being a comedy, they're kind of rewriting the history. And that in particular, the way they talked about the Vietnam War and the way they portrayed the anti-war left and the Black Panthers and Lieutenant Dan and all of that, it was very, very much like trying to rewrite how the 1960s political crisis happened. That's very much, you watch it, and that's when the USA invaded Iraq. When I was in high school, the memo was sent out. You can't protest the war in Iraq because during the 60s, there were all these hippies going around spitting on our troops and disrespecting the country. Well, that's in Forrest Gump, right? And you watch Forrest Gump, it's like an attempt to retell the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, retell them in a way of like, we're now in the 90s. We admit racism is bad. We admit the Vietnam War was bad, but the anti-war left was also bad, and the Black Panthers were also bad, and we all just moved on, and America's a great place where even a really, really dumb guy can be famous because he just started running, and it was also, I mean, a lot of American stuff has this underlying message of like, in America, you can just get rich by accident, right? Even Jackson Pollock's paintings, right? As much as the CIA promoted it as an alternative to social realism, there was just an underlying statement that, look, in America, you can become famous by just throwing paint on a canvas, right? And that, like, kind of the message of Forrest Gump is, look, Forrest Gump is dumb, right? He's just this dumb Southern Bubba. I'm a dumb life is like a box of chocolates. He's just this dumb Southern Bubba who happens to be famous and rich because that's what America is all about, right? And that, that Forrest Gump, it was very effective propaganda about America being, to the world, it's like America is this dream country, right? And he invests in Apple and becomes a millionaire, and he is in all these historic moments. And it's like, how many, low income white people from the South, don't accomplish very much in their entire lives just because, of circumstances. But here he is, he's just going through life, and it's like, he's dumb, but America is just such a plentiful, opportune place. That's kind of served an international purpose, but domestically, it was very much rewriting the politics of the 1960s and retelling the Vietnam thing, retelling the racial unrest that we experienced during that period. Forrest Gump really did serve a kind of propaganda purpose, very, very much so, on a number of levels. It was like America telling its history, right? It was almost like the government published a textbook to like tell you how you should remember the turmoil of the Cold War years, and like the party approved message of how to understand the previous decades. It came out in the early 90s. It's like the Cold War is over, the Soviet Union is gone. We obviously changed a lot as a nation throughout the Cold War, so here's how we're going to remember it. And if you think about it that way, it's like you can understand why Hollywood is such an important institution. Another thing I noticed was in the early years of the Obama administration, like right as Obama was coming into office and during Obama's early years, there were a lot of like truth and reconciliation films that were very, very political, that were about leftist things, but they were like giving a very limited version of events, right? Right as Obama, like I think the last year of the Obama, what year was it? The movie The Good Shepherd came out. It's a Matt Damon movie, and The Good Shepherd is about the CIA, and it's about the Order of Skull and Bones. It's about Project MK Ultra. It's about all these evil things that the CIA did throughout the Cold War. And it's from the perspective of like this kid who goes to Harvard, and he's like, his dad, he lost his father, and he doesn't know what happened to his father, and he ends up getting recruited into the CIA, and they do a whole bunch of evil things. Basically, he's an evil CIA guy, and it shows you, and it's very much an anti-US government film, so to speak, but it's like the problem isn't the American government. The problem is just corruption, right? Among the old Ivy League elite or among the Pentagon or something. And you watch it, and it's like the film is very much, and it was things that people in America didn't used to acknowledge, like Project MK Ultra, where the CIA was giving out drugs, like like the coups in Latin America, the torture that went on, and it was like a weird, like, we're going to acknowledge that the U.S. government did these things, but we're going to tell the story on our terms. And like the movie Hoover, right? Leonardo DiCaprio made a movie called about the life of J. Edgar Hoover, FBI director. Came out during the same time, the early Obama years. And it was like things that I remember I used to tell people when I was in high school, when I was college. I'd say, the U.S. government had, COINTELPRO. FBI went after the Black Panthers, went after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., tried to get him to kill himself. People would roll their eyes and say, that's a crazy conspiracy theory. America would never do that. Well, I would prove to them that, show them that it happened. Well, now people know that stuff happened, but it's like they learned about it from a Leonardo DiCaprio movie, and they learned, well, that happened because J. Edgar Hoover had issues with his mother and was closeted gay, and and it's like we learned about all the bad things that America did during the Cold War, but we learned about them on our own terms, kind of on the terms of the American government, right? And that was quite interesting. It was like during the Bush years, they didn't acknowledge that kind of thing. If you brought that kind of thing up, people rolled their eyes, right? Forrest Gump certainly didn't acknowledge anything like that. But then during the early Obama years, there was kind of this weird, like, well, we're going to acknowledge some of the skeletons in America's closet, and Hollywood is going to tell you about them in a movie so that we can frame it as not something that would lead you to be an anti-imperialist. We're just going to kind of, it's that whole thing about, like, if you cheat on your spouse, is it better that they find out about it later? Or is it better that you tell them first, right? And so it's like we learn about it from them, and they frame it in their own way. It's kind of what those movies were. The early Obama administration had a lot of very political movies that came out that were about kind of bad things the American government has done, and it was kind of almost inoculating the U.S. public against hearing about them and drawing different conclusions from them. The other thing about the Obama years was the Obama years really started the beginning of the Marvel superhero movie, right? The superhero movies. And I think it was that during the Obama administration, around that time, someone said that the average, the typical movie theater attendee was a 14-year-old male. And that because of that, they started really just churning out superhero Marvel Avengers movies, Spider-Man after Spider-Man after Spider-Man. They just started churning those out because that was your typical teenage boy would go to see those movies. And there were a lot of them, right? And they did the backstory, they the X-Men movies, and Wolverine, the backstory, and you watched all those movies, and it was like superhero movie after superhero movie after superhero movie, because those films were guaranteed to make money, right? Even if it was awful, they could make the worst Spider-Man movie ever. They could make the worst Avengers movie ever. People were still going to go see it. There was a layer of people, namely like young men, we're just going to go see it no matter what. Those films, I remember that was a big part of like the Obama years. And that's a big part even up to now. I mean, they still make those superhero films, not as much as they were. They were making them like crazy before. I mean, it was like every 2 minutes they made another Avengers film or another X-Men film or another Spider-Man, or, they've kind of slowed that down a little bit. Another thing I noticed during the early Obama years, right, is Hollywood, there was kind of like, Obama was president, and Obama was seen as like from the left. And there was the Tea Party, right? The Tea Party was opposing Obama. And even though Hollywood is a very, very liberal place, there were a number of films that were pushing right-wing messages in a much more blatant way than before. It was almost like they were on the defensive. For example, the movie Argo, this anti-Iran, anti-Islamic revolution propaganda film that came out, that won Best Picture, and Iran was just horrified. It was a really, I mean, it portrayed the taking of the U.S. embassy in Tehran and the taking of the Iranian hostages, but it portrayed it in a wildly inaccurate way. For example, it depicted mock executions, which didn't happen, right? The people, the hostages in the embassy, they had their own cook. They just did what they were not mock executed. They didn't put blindfolds on them and take them before firing squads to like make them think they were going to die and traumatize them. That didn't happen, right? And that I mean, the Iran hostage crisis was portrayed in this really over the top way to portray the Iranian people as just these evil, murderous, hateful people. I mean, it was just a really, really hateful Zionist propaganda film. It won Best Picture, and that shows how much power Hollywood, how much power Zionism has in Hollywood. They made another movie that won Best Picture, was Slumdog Millionaire. And Slumdog Millionaire was a neoliberal propaganda film, if ever. I mean, it was like Atlas Shrugged. It's this kid in India who serves tea at a what do you call it, at a call center. He gets on the show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and he wins $1 million. And it's like he's on the show, the Indian version of the show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, the TV game show. And for every question, he has like a memory of something that happened in his life that like helps him, that's why he knows the answer to the question. And then he's tortured. The government like tortures him because they assume he must be cheating because no poor person could know all of this. And there's just so many messages in the film, so many moments in the film where it's basically the message of the film is that the people of India are backward, barbaric savages, but luckily the free market and capitalism is going to modernize them. That was the message of the film. It was really awful. I mean, at one point in the film, like, and the kid is supposed to be like, he's a Howard Rourke. He's he's like one of these, a self-made man or whatever. And like, towards the beginning of the film, the kid is homeless. And so there's this group of kids that are begging for money on the street. And there's this nice old man who like takes care of the kids. But then, they find out the nice old man blinds the kids and is cutting off their arms and legs because he thinks that they'll get more money when they beg. And so they're going to blind him. And so he runs away to get away from, and that's the message is see compassion. There's no nice people in the world. Compassion is for suckers. It's a predatory thing. That's how it starts out. At one point, then the kid, he's homeless and he's on the street and all this. And at one point, and he goes to the Taj Mahal and becomes a tour guide, even though he doesn't have a license to do it. He's just a regular tour guide. And he's being a tour guide for this American couple, and he's just making it up as he goes along. And he's just so good right there, And so then the people that actually run the Taj Mahal see the kid, and they grab him and they start beating him up right in front of this American couple, and they're beating him up, and the American couple like rescue him. And he says to them, "Oh, now you know what the real India is all about." And then the American couple, the father, takes a $20 bill out of his pocket and gives it to the kid. And he says, "Now you know what the real America is all about." It was so blatantly neoliberal propaganda. I mean, it was really, really blatant. I mean, it was just sick. And then the whole point is like he's rising and working hard, right, and trying to get ahead in this backward, primitive, socialistic society that punishes success. And his brother, it becomes a criminal, right? And the idea is his brother, he turns to crime, and so his brother ends up getting killed or whatever. But at one point, he and his brother are like someplace, and they look out. There's like a scene where they look out on this city, and they say, "Do you remember when this was just a little village or whatever?" And it was supposed to be like, look how capitalism is modernizing India. I mean, it was really the message of the film was that that India is backward and barbaric, but free market capitalism and neoliberalism and, the virtue of selfishness and the greatness of the free market system is going to rescue India. That was the message of the film. And you watch it, I mean, it was really blatant. And what was crazy is apparently on the night that they won the Oscar, the kid who starred in it, who was the star of the film, was homeless, right? Like it was just two British white dudes made money off the film. They went to India and they hired, low income people to be the actors in it, and they made all the money. And that, like, the kid, it was kind of a scandal that the kid who starred in it was homeless, right? But that was it was like an Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand, it was very, very bad. There was another movie that came out during those years. It was called Extract. And it was very, very much, you watched Extract. It was a comedy, and it was kind of like The Office. It was like quirky people who work at a company, but it was about a factory that made vanilla extract. And the message of the film is that the boss is unappreciated, right? The capitalist boss is unappreciated, and that the quirky people, the like crazy losers who work there, don't understand that the boss is a nice guy who's giving them a job, and he's patient with them, and he loves them. And I don't know. It was very much, it was like it was against like labor unions, basically. And at one point, like, they're mad about something and they're going to go on strike, and he shouts at them, "Why don't you just run the whole company? Don't you know what I go through?" And it's like the boss is the oppressed one, right? And it's that he's so nice. He employs these crazy, quirky people to work at his company, but they're all like a family, and he takes care of them. It was very much a kind of an anti-labor union film. If there ever was one. You watched Extract. I think it was Matt Damon, or I don't know. One of those guys was in it, and it was very much an Atlas Shrugged kind of, it was also kind of a pushback against the Obama administration. You watched it. There are certain themes, if you watch American movies, there are certain themes that like go with the times. For example, films from the 1960s, a lot of them have this real optimism about them, right? One of my favorite movies when I was a kid, I used to get VHS tapes. One of my favorite movies was Blackbeard's Ghost. It was just this Disney movie, about it's Peter Ustinov, the actor, plays the ghost of the pirate Blackbeard. I didn't know when the film was made. It was just a movie I watched a bunch of times when I was a kid. But apparently that film, it came out in 1969, right? And that there was, all of Hollywood, everybody was in kind of this optimistic mode. You watch 1960s films, they often have this very kind of optimistic vibe to them. There was a hit song, the hit song in the early 60s was Impossible Dream, Man of La Mancha, right? Hollywood and Broadway kind of go together, and it's like, the Impossible Dream, right? Dream the Impossible Dream was a big song. And you had like They Call the Wind, Mariah, and it was like, you look at like Broadway and Hollywood were closer than ever in those days, right? They would make a musical that'd be a hit on Broadway, and they'd make the movie like the next year, right? The Music Man and all of that. And there was this kind of optimism that just kind of flowed from 1960s TV, right? And TV and movies, and that was the age of Star Trek, when Star Trek first started on television, and then in the 1970s, that's when you start getting very dark, kind of pessimistic films, right? Especially like the sci-fi movies of the 1970s are all very, very, very dark. Charlton Heston made a number of science fiction films in the 1970s, and all of them are very, very dark. So obviously there's the Planet of the Apes, right? Which is, these astronauts, they go to a new planet, they go to a planet, and all the people on the planet are apes instead of humans. The apes are there, and then they eventually, towards the end of the movie, they learn that it's Earth, that it's actually they're in Earth in the future, right? And the Earth has been taken over by the apes. The human beings are slaves, and the apes run the world. And there's a bunch of sequels, right? There's like Rise of the Planet of the Apes and Battle for the Planet of the Apes, and it's like this like pessimistic narrative where one day the apes get together and overthrow the humans and bring on this like dark world where human beings are slaves of the apes. If you watch like one of the Planet of the Apes sequels, I can't remember the one. It's like the one that's portraying the revolution where the apes take over and overthrow the humans. There's one ape who's like the talking ape, who is supposed to be a communist, right? He's supposed to be like the prophet, the Marxist revolutionary of the apes, who's like inspiring the apes to rise up against the humans or something. And it's kind of amusing because it was the 1970s, and obviously global communism was a thing, and he's like the prophet of the apes, right? The other thing is there's another movie that came out in the late 70s that's very dark, very, very dark. It's called Soylent Green. And it is a dystopian kind of vaguely anti-capitalist, but very Malthusian film called Soylent Green. And it's about like this futuristic world where the human race has overpopulated so much and there's not enough food to go around, and all these people are going out and rioting because they want food, and so they just kill them. They have the scoops and they like scoop them up and like kill them when they go out and riot. And and it turns out this food that everyone's eating, Soylent Green, is actually made out of people. It's like they're eating people, right? That's the end of the movie. It's like Soylent Green is people, right? And it's a very, and it's like the planet is heated up because of global warming and there's too many people. And then the other thing is that like certain people, like the rich people, have names, and then the poor people are named after objects. Like if you have a librarian is called a book, right? And if you have like a maid who cleans your house, she's called furniture, right? And it's like I don't know, it's like some kind of weird like quasi-Marxist and Malthusian dystopia of overpopulated world where human beings are eating each other. And I don't know, it's very weird. That's Charlton Heston, right? Soylent Green. And then there's a film from the early 70s, another dark sci-fi film, and it's called The Omega Man. And it's interesting because it's based on a novel, which I read, called I Am Legend. And the novel, it's a 1950s sci-fi novel. And they have made it into a movie a bunch of different times. Like the latest one I have not seen was with Will Smith. But there's a version called The Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price. And there's a bunch of them. But The Omega Man with Charlton Heston is the most political, I would say, right? I mean, the premise of the story is there's been a nuclear war. So most of humanity is dead. But the nuclear war has turned all the humans that are still alive into vampires. And they're vampires, and they can only come out at night. They're sensitive to light, and they drink blood or whatever. And there's one human on the planet still, right? And his name is Neville, and he's this like angry old man. He's the last man on Earth. That's what the book, the novel, is about. In the Omega Man, which is the Charlton Heston version of it, that came out in the early 70s, it's really political. For example, every day, Neville, the man is played by Charlton Heston, and he's this conservative guy who's got guns and doesn't like hippies. And every day he goes to the movies, and the movie that they have there from when the nuclear war happened is Woodstock. And he goes and he watches Woodstock, the hippie movie, and he seethes as he watches Woodstock. Those damn hippies, I hate them. Right. And so then in the Omega Man, what happens is he's the last man on Earth. He's lonely. Every night he has to like lock himself up so the vampires can't come get him. Right. And, but he sees another person, a black woman. And the black woman like lures him out. And that's how they eventually catch him and kill him. And it's almost like this weird, like far right analogy. Obvious. Oh, and the other thing is the vampires in the Omega Man, in the Charlton Heston version, they're not just vampires. They're a religion, right? And they have a prophet named Matthias, and they don't believe in technology. They believe science is what caused the nuclear war, and so they're against technology. And if they see anyone having technology, they like destroy it. And they're this mob of like anti-technology people that follow the prophet Matthias, right? They're supposed to be hippies, right? And Charlton Heston is supposed to represent middle America, and it's like these hippies that just want to destroy everything and tear everything down, and he stands for middle America. But then he falls in love with this black woman, and that's how they get him, right? And it's like actually a racist analogy. It's like by sympathizing with black people, that's how like white America is going to commit suicide or something. It's a very, very far right analogy, right? It's clearly anti-New Left. I mean, the vampires are the hippies, and the fact that it's like his sympathy for this beautiful black woman who actually, like, she is a vampire. She just has this quirk where she can go out during the day. That's how they get him. I mean, it's really dark. The Omega Man, and a lot of those movies. Now, a weird thing, I'll just passingly mention this, is that in the late 70s, that's when you had the rise of Sylvester Stallone. And Sylvester Stallone made the movie Rocky, which Rocky was, you watch Rocky, it's a very well-made film. It's, an underdog story about a boxer. And it was a fairly low-budget film that Sylvester Stallone made, and it became a big hit. It's a well-made film. It's an exciting film. He doesn't win, but he proves himself, right? The fight is his big break, right? He's going to fight Apollo Creed, who's this famous boxer, and he's this kind of unheard of boxer, this working class guy from Philadelphia who works in a meat locker. He's a meat packing worker, and he's working class, and his life is kind of miserable. He's lonely or whatever, but boxing is his passion. And then he gets the chance to fight Apollo Creed, and he doesn't win the fight, but it's it makes his career. And there's this girl next door who's this lonely woman who he's kind of in love with, but she has a crazy brother. And it's a well-made film. It's clever. I believe Sylvester Stallone wrote it, and it was a hit. It was a hit. It was, it was a film that really made a difference. And so after that, Sylvester Stallone, I think, had a little bit of a leftist background. So he made a film called Fist. After he made Rocky, he made this movie called Fist, which was about the Teamsters Union. It's a labor film. It's kind of a leftist Marxist film about truck drivers unions, right? And it's FIST stands for Federation of Interstate Truckers. And it's supposed to be about Jimmy Hoffa and the Teamsters Union, right? And, Sylvester Stallone plays a working class guy in Cleveland, who is a truck driver, and he's tired of seeing the truck drivers get kicked around. And, what is our name? Our name is Fist. It ain't just a bunch of letters like any other union. It's Fist, right? And it's these tough truck drivers who are fighting for their lives or whatever. It's like a leftist, pro-labor kind of film. But then it shows he gets corrupt after the union gets so big. He's, super wealthy. And at one point, they walk in and they say, there's the people at the shop downtown. They don't want to join the union. They like their boss. He's like, they're getting a union whether they like it or not. It's supposed to be he's Jimmy Hoffa, he's corrupt. That's the second half of the film. But, it's kind of a leftist movie. And that was one thing you did see in the late 70s, the late 70s. There was kind of a weird thing where I think it was related to the Carter administration. It was related to Euro communism and how they were pulling the communist parties of Europe away from the Soviet Union. And you had the movie Reds starring Warren Beatty. And then you had this movie that I have tried to watch, which I find unwatchable, which is called Heaven's Gate. It's this really long Marxist film about in Colorado, Eastern European immigrants form the Wobblies, the anarchist union, and they're fighting against these wealthy ranchers, right? And I have tried to watch it, and it is just so long and dull, and it's considered one of the worst movies ever, right? It's called Heaven's Gate, but apparently Sam Marcy and the Workers' World Party, they loved it, right? They just thought it was the best film ever. I've tried to watch it. It's just unwatchable, right? It's this rich guy from Harvard, but then he goes out to Colorado, and there are these poor immigrants, and they're fighting for their lives, and they speak Russian. They don't speak English, but they're fighting against the wealthy landowners that are ruthless and cruel or something. I don't know. I couldn't finish it. It was just and it's considered a really awful movie. I mean, it's got very, very negative reviews. I mean, it just bombed epically in the box office, but it's considered to be, it's the Workers' World Party people really liked it. Reds, starring Warren Beatty, is I've talked about that movie endlessly on these streams. I have a lot to say about that movie. It's a movie about the founding of the U.S. Communist Party and John Reed, the American journalist who was a witness to the Russian Revolution. Not going to talk too much about that tonight. There's another genre of movie that was very big in the early years of the Cold War, in the 50s and 60s. I think the 70s is when they really stopped making them. That's what they call sword and sandal movies, right? Sword and sandal. It was a genre of movie where it was Hollywood made Bible movies because it was they wanted Americans to go see it. Americans were very religious, it's right. And the idea was that if you make a Bible movie, very religious people out in Idaho and Montana will go see it. And so they made out many of these Bible movies, sword and sandal movies. And they were movies that are somehow related to the Bible, related to ancient Rome, ancient Greece, whatever. Probably the most famous one is Ben-Hur. right? It's based on this famous American novel, Ben-Hur. It stars Charlton Heston. It's about a Jewish prince who is sold as a galley slave and ends up winning a chariot race in Rome, and then goes back and helps Jesus when he's getting crucified and all of this. When I watched Ben-Hur recently, I realized how Zionist the film is. And Charlton Heston made another film called The Ten Commandments, which is also very Zionist, right? Which is interesting, right? Because these are films that are aimed at a Christian audience, but there's so much emphasis on, and it's about ancient times. I mean, it's not about the Holocaust or anything like that, but it's like so much emphasis on like Jews are being persecuted. Jews are the chosen people. Israel is their homeland. There's a lot of like Zionist propaganda in both of those films, to the point that, like in Ben-Hur, the Romans do their salute, which is, in most of those movies, we all know how the Romans saluted, right? You don't, obviously that the Roman salute became, something you don't do because of obviously somebody during World War II started using it. But in Ben-Hur, the Romans are always doing that. And they keep emphasizing Jews as the chosen people. Jews are persecuted. Jews are oppressed. And the Romans are always Roman saluting each other. And you watch it like this is Zionism. I mean, it's very Zionist. And the same for the Ten Commandments, right? The Ten Commandments is about Exodus, right? It's about, the plagues and leaving Egypt and the parting of the Red Sea and all this. It's about Moses, right? And it's also got a lot of like not so subtle shilling for Israel in it, right? Israel was very new at that point, and it was actually the liberals in those days, in the 50s and 60s. It was liberals that were big supporters of Israel. It was conservatives that were skeptics of it back then. Israel was more of a liberal country. But yeah, the two most famous sword and sandal movies are The Ten Commandments and Ben-Hur. Both starred Charlton Heston. And I would say both of them are very, very subtly, or not so subtly, Zionist films. There's another Bible movie from that time period. It's called The Robe. And you watch The Robe, it's Robin Hood. They basically just wanted to make a Robin Hood like sword fighting action movie, but they wanted middle America to watch it, so they made it about the Bible. But it's Robin Hood, right? I think Robin Hood came out in the 1930s. It's considered a classic Hollywood film. And then they made Zorro, all right, the Mark of Zorro, starring Tyrone Power, which is Robin Hood set in California during the Spanish colonial period. And Robin Hood is El Zorro, who wears his mask. And so then they made The Robe, and The Robe it's Robin Hood, basically. I mean, it's just, the Christians are, fighting the Romans and doing all this sword fighting, and, the Romans are evil. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's not really a religious film. It's a sword fighting epic, basically, that just happens to use the Bible as its backstory. And then, of course, there's a movie that I've talked about endlessly on these streams, which I will vaguely reference tonight, which is Spartacus. Spartacus was a sword and sandal movie, right? But it was based on a novel written by Howard Fast, and the screenplay was written by communist Dalton Trumbo, and it's a Marxist piece. It just happens to take place at the time of the Roman Empire. And that may have been part of why it was so controversial. It was mainly controversial because of the communism. However, and I mean, the first section of my book, Divisions in the Ruling Class, is about the movie Spartacus. I have a whole analysis about how it was made, and it was like a rebuff of McCarthyism and all of that. I am Spartacus. No, I am Spartacus, right? But also, like, apparently the Catholic Legion of Decency was very, very offended by the fact that it ends, and this is historically accurate, the Romans crucified all the slave rebels. And so as like a favor to the Catholic Legion of Decency, they're not crucified on crosses in the final scene. They crucify them on T's rather than crosses, because that would have been offensive. And there's a lot of things like that. And if you would watch Spartacus on the surface, it looks like one of those sword and sandal Bible movies, but it's actually a Marxist analogy about a slave revolt and the fall of the Roman Republic and fascism and all kinds of stuff. So I've talked about that. I've actually written extensively about that film, and that it was very, very political. It served an intelligence purpose. It was a gesture to Khrushchev. And I have a lot of thoughts about that movie, but we'll talk more about that another time. There's another type of film that I don't quite know what to make of. And those are the spaghetti Westerns. All right. Have you ever watched those? The most famous of them is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Starring Clint Eastwood, but there's also Fistful of Dollars, A Few Dollars More, Hang 'em High. There's a bunch of these like late 70s, low budget Italian Westerns. And you watch them and they're Western, they're cowboy movies. They filmed them in Spain. They were made by Italian film companies, usually Italian directors. And they take place in the United States. They're cowboy movies, but they're not, most cowboy movies have like kind of an uplifting message. These films are very dark. They tend to have a lot of very brutal violence in them, like people being tortured, people having their limbs cut off and shit like that. But then they're kind of like making fun of the Western genre. They're kind of spoofs if you watch them. They're mocking the Western genre. And the other thing, and this is so wild, the directors of those films were all communists. I did not know that, right? I mean, you wouldn't know that from watching them. And they're very pessimistic films. They don't make you feel like you want to rise up and revolt, but they all have like vague messages about capitalist alienation. They're like Gramscian, like New Left pieces. Like at the end of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, they're in the graveyard and they have a shootout, right? And that's where they play like a really, famous piece of music from that film called The Ecstasy of Gold. And they have a shootout over who, there's three guys, but only one of them is going to get the treasure, right? And they've all finally gotten to the graveyard and they're going to find the treasure where it's buried, and they have their shootout, and it's like they're all like the greed is killing them and they're in this giant graveyard together and they're going to have a shootout. It's kind of like a message about like greed and capitalist alienation and stuff. But again, you don't watch those films and want to rise up and have a movement to overthrow imperialism. You just kind of, and the spaghetti Westerns, they're kind of, I mean, the music, especially in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the musical soundtrack is amazing and they're well shot. They tend to be low budget but they're very, very well shot, I will say, but you don't really feel good. But I had no idea that most of the filmmakers were Italian Communist Party members, but it's that whole cultural Marxism thing. Like it's Gramsci, it's like that existential, like we're going to write about the alienation that we feel. It's not the kind of Marxism that I enjoy, right? It's this kind of pessimistic European existential Marxism, that kind of thing, right? The spaghetti Westerns. Which I think is interesting as well. So yeah, I'm trying to see. So I guess I'll just end with one concept. There was a guy in Cleveland I was very close to. He was a friend of mine, and he was just a nice man. Sometimes in your life, you need a friend more than other times, and you run into somebody who maybe under different circumstances wouldn't have been your friend. This guy was a guy in Cleveland, and he had been in the Socialist Workers Party, the SWP. And the SWP, in the 80s, they became very, very rigid. You had to work in certain industries. You had to be a garment worker or a meat packer or a coal miner, right? You had to have certain jobs, and it was very demanding. Like it was, very much a Leninist the whole of your lives. And he'd been in the SWP. And then, he had gotten, I think he had a wife who had a child from a previous marriage, and he just couldn't, he was working in a garment factory and they weren't paying him enough. He had to support the child. And so he had to get a different job. And so he had to leave the SWP, but he really believed in communism. And whenever I would hang out with this guy was very smart. He taught me a lot. One thing he would talk about is when he was in the SWP, they would go to the movies together. The SWP branch. They all worked in the same garment factory, and they would go to the movies every Sunday, and then they would talk about the movie afterwards, and talk about how they could use the movie to explain Marxism to their coworkers. And so he was very good at making Marxist analogies about movies and stuff, because that was part of what he did when he was in the SWP. And that, it's kind of why I appreciated when I was in high school, my senior year of high school, when I went to that movie theater in my town, I saw every movie. I didn't see good movies. I didn't see just movies I was interested in. I saw whatever was there. And a lot of what I was watching was what you would call pulp, right? Pulp. Bad movies, kind of. But that's how you kind of get a measure for where people are at, right? It's better to watch, in some cases, it's better to watch pulp, not because it's going to make you smarter, but because it shows you pulp movies are what people are watching, right? They're what people are seeing. Go to see the latest kids cartoon movie, go to see the family comedy, go to see the action movie, the sequel of the sequel of the sequel of, the latest Avengers film, because by seeing that, you will be in touch with people that are not part of, your kind of intellectual political bubble. That's a good thing. And that was a good habit that I kind of learned from my friend in Cleveland, was that it's important to go see pulp movies in order to be able to explain politics. And that's important. I mean, I make a point of watching SNL, for that reason, because I want to be in touch with how people are seeing things. And, there's a movie theater in my neighborhood. My wife and I will go, and it shows B movies. And sometimes we'll just go see B movies, movies that are, just cartoons or whatever, because kids cartoons or action movies, like, low pulp movies, and I guess there's this whole thing on social media now about slop because of AI and all of that. And, I don't know if this is slop necessarily, but, going to see just your typical, standard budget Hollywood film. It's not some deeply political thing. It's not, an epic work. It's just like a stupid comedy or a stupid action movie. Sometimes that can be good for you. It's actually really good for you to do that. And, and they would say, take your class glasses while you go to it and look for the politics of the film, and also look at what this says about where people are at in the country, how they feel. That's a really important thing to do. And that's something I learned from my friend in Cleveland. The other thing that I learned from him is he really taught me about a concept which is very, very, very important in order to understand Western art, which is the concept of petty bourgeois fatalism. Right? That sounds very highfalutin, right? Doesn't it? Petty bourgeois fatalism. But I remember talking about Hunger Games with him, and he said, this is petty bourgeois fatalism. There are so many dystopian films, so many films about the futuristic society that is evil and oppressive and authoritarian. What that is that's petty bourgeois fatalism. After the Second World War, the petty bourgeoisie was doomed. It was doomed because communism and fascism represented the suppression of the petty bourgeoisie. Fascism represented the consolidation of the power of the big monopolies, and communism represented the victory of the working class. And the small business owner, the petty bourgeois, was fucked. And that coming out of World War II, you had George Orwell, 1984, Animal Farm. You also had Anthem by Ayn Rand. Just prior to the Second World War, you had Brave New World. And that there was so much dystopianism in science fiction and in literature because the petty bourgeois was looking to the future with horror. And it's like anti-populist dystopianism is a really big theme. And it's the petty bourgeoisie is the class with no future, right? The petty bourgeoisie, it clings to its own independence and its own individuality, but it's facing the threat of workers' revolution, and it's facing the threat of big capital and monopoly, putting it out of business. And that a lot of American art and literature and Western literature in the post-World War II years represents the pessimism of the petty bourgeoisie. And if you can understand it that way, it's very, very interesting. And also that is a really big part of the Trotsky book, because if you read, what Trotsky wrote about the people who became the neoconservatives, right? If you read about James Burnham and Max Shachtman and Martin Aburn and all that, he says, look, they represent the petty bourgeoisie, right? And that they don't have proletarian, party patriotism. They have petty bourgeois vacillation and aspirations, right? And you read the struggle, I quote in this book extensively from The Struggle for a Proletarian Party by James Cannon, where that's his criticism. He says that the neocon, the neo-Trotskyites, the people who broke with the Fourth International, and became neoconservatives eventually. First, they were the third camp Trotskyites, then they became neoconservatives, that milieu was very much invested in their petty bourgeois existence, and they could not become committed to being in a proletarian party. And they were threatened by both the Soviet Union and the Western capitalist system. They both saw them as a threat to their individualism. And that a lot of the philosophical irrationalism of Nietzsche and Leo Strauss, kind of, and Irving Kristol, and a lot of that anti-populism that comes out of neoconservatism, that is the basis of the neoconservative thought, is petty bourgeois fatalism. This idea that the people are the enemy, the people are naturally totalitarian, and there's no hope, right? And George Orwell's 1984, it makes this point about a boot stomping on the human face, right? That's a really, really big theme. And that petty bourgeois fatalism, and it was this guy in Cleveland, the guy who had been in the SWP, and they had endless classes about the split in the SWP and Trotsky's fight with the Shachtmanites. And they'd emphasized petty bourgeois fatalism as the kind of the anti-party sentiments of the petty bourgeoisie. And I think that was a very profound point as well. So yeah, I guess I just thought for my opening remarks tonight, I would just talk for an hour about movies. We talked about 90s movies. We talked about all kinds of different things. We talked about spaghetti westerns and 80s comedies and all kinds of stuff. We talked about Sylvester Stallone. We talked about spaghetti westerns. We talked about sword and sandal movies. We talked about dark sci-fi movies. We talked about we talked about Obama era movies, superhero movies, Forrest Gump, 80s comedies. We talked about a lot of different stuff. So I hope you all enjoyed this. That was just kind of what I thought, it's kind of, the news is not at a place right now where I feel like I want to talk about current events or anything. So I thought I'd just talk about movies for the first hour. So I hope you all enjoyed it. Hope you liked it. If you have any questions for the second half, I see a few people have sent questions already, and I do appreciate that. So if you got any more questions, the best way to send questions is buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee is the absolute best way to send questions. You can also send Rumble rants. You can also Cash App me at CalebMoppin22. But yeah, let's do the roll call, and then I'll answer questions. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us? Who's with us? Who is with us? Auckland in New Zealand. Welcome, Auckland. Bendigo, David Fox, good to see you. Ryan in Kansas City. Rose, Lawrence Johnson in Chicago. Billy in Sanford, North Carolina. Good to see you, Billy. JT24 in Mississippi. Works in Progress, Ottawa. Liverpool, UK. Jacob in Wisconsin. Good to have you with us. Jenny in Cincinnati. Maria in Wyoming. Good to have you, Maria. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations, names and locations, names and locations, names and locations, names and locations. Okay, names and locations. Names and locations. Kew Gardens, Peter and Snow, Dan from the movie capital of the world out in LA, Kate and Tavis. Good to see you both. John in Chicago. Good to have you. Good to have you. Good to have you. Gabby, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah. That's odd. That's a little strange. Gabby tried to send her question and it wouldn't let her. That's odd. Connor in British Columbia. Jenny in Western Illinois. Gavin. Ryan in Maryland. Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Good to have you with us. Good to have you with us. Ryan in Maryland. Good to have you. Anybody else? Names and locations. Then we'll start answering people's questions. Gabby, you can send your question anyhow. I'll just, if it doesn't go through, I'll still answer your question. So, but yeah, names and locations. Anybody else? Anybody else? Names and locations, names and locations. Names and locations. All right. Okay. Tavis Gibbon says, K Caleb, Kate told me you guys are talking about movies. Reminded me of a great Michael Parenti book, Make Believe Media, which opened my mind to the CIA involvement in media. What role has the Israeli intelligence played in our Hollywood industry? Well, it's interesting. You asked specifically about Israeli intelligence, right? That is like a taboo subject because, if you say that Israel has a role in, influencing American movies, then you are anti-Semitic, right? You're saying the anti-Semitic trope of, quote, Jews run Hollywood. So you got to be careful with that. But I mean, Hollywood is very pro-Israel. I mean, there's no way around that. Hollywood is very, very, very pro-Israel. I mean, Argo, I talked about Argo. I mean, that was ridiculous. This anti-Iran, propaganda film that won Best Picture in Hollywood. I mean, unbelievably. But there's a lot of Hollywood movies that are quite anti-Islamic, portray Muslims as terrorists, portray, the United States and Israel as outposts of civilization. I mean, there's a lot of that. I mean, in terms of Mossad in particular, I mean, the role of American intelligence in Hollywood is very well documented. And you read, there's a book, Finks, How the CIA, I think I have it right here, Finks, How the CIA Tricked the World's Greatest Writers by Joel Whitney. This book actually talks about how at one point in the 1950s, they made sure that on the board of every Hollywood major studio, there was a CIA asset. And the CIA could get movies removed if they didn't like them. It was that blatant. So, I mean, there are obviously, certain themes, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it gets weird sometimes. For example, in the, one of the new Star Wars movies that came out, there's the villain in Star Wars, right? It's Darth Vader. He's a Sith Lord. He's the Emperor. But they decided that they're going to name the bad guy the Supreme Leader. Where does that come from? That's Iran. Just things like that. Another thing that was weird, and somebody told me about this, is that in the X-Men movie, they made an X-Men movie a few years ago, and the opening scene is in ancient Egypt, right? And it's like the mutant was around back then in ancient Egypt, and there's some prayer, and it's supposed to be in ancient Egypt, right? Long before the Prophet Muhammad or whatever. And it has the Egyptians praying, but they're praying an Islamic prayer. And it's they're actually praying in Arabic. They're praying a traditional Islamic prayer to subtly get into your head that Muslims are bad. There's a lot of weird things like that in Hollywood. Very, very odd, oddly anti-Islamic, oddly pro, little subtle things that you wouldn't notice that they kind of fit in to Hollywood films, where it's kind of anti-Islamic, the idea that Islamic people are backward and primitive, and that kind of thing. It kind of Zionist. I mean, I will say that I think one of the most a film that is the most blatantly Zionist would be the Borat stuff. Sacha Baron Cohen is a crazy Zionist. And Sacha Baron Cohen, I mean, the movies that he makes, Borat, for example, right? Borat, he's supposed to be from Kazakhstan, which is a Muslim country, used to be part of the USSR, but he's not an Arab. He's a Central Asian, he's he's not an Arab, but he goes around and it's saying anti-Semitic things that sound really stupid. Right. And he's like, is the Jew has horns. Hey, look at the Jew. We have problems in our country, economic, social, and Jew. It's and he just is a caricature. I mean, it's look at third world people, look at Muslims, look at Russians, look at people from the former Soviet Union, look at Eastern Europeans. They're all a bunch of mentally retarded bigots. That's basically the film. But then it's even worse than that, because what is the premise of the film? So this guy, this idiotic anti-Semitic guy from Eastern Europe, not from Eastern Europe, from Central Asia, from Kazakhstan, comes to America, and it's Sacha Baron Cohen, it's hidden camera kind of shit, and he goes into various situations and he gets Americans to say bigoted things. and he gets Americans to like agree with him. And like, there's like, for example, like he's riding in there's like a group of frat boys, and he's like drinking with them, and he gets them to say really racist stuff. He goes to a cowboy rodeo, and he's saying to the cowboys, in my country, we kill all the homosexual, we cut their head off. And then the cowboy says, well, that's what we ought to do here, and like the message of the film is that deep down Americans are a bunch of Borats, right? That, yeah, obviously, people in other countries are inferior, retarded anti-Semites, right? That's just assumed. I mean, I'm not saying that myself. I'm like, that's the message of the film. But also deep down, average Americans are the same way, right? We're just the same way. We all want to kill the Jews, throw the Jews down the well. We all want to, cut off the heads of gays and all that. And that's why you need Israel. So the smart Jews that are not, inferior and, blood drinking, idiotic, mentally challenged, bigots, that they need their own country to be protected from us, from us. I mean, it's really nasty. It's funny. I mean, it's funny shit, and he's running through a hotel room naked and, but it's like, and, I mean, but it's really nasty. I mean, it's really, really, really Zionist, right? I mean, his character is like a caricature of what Zionists think all anti-Semites are, what Zionists think all anti-Israel people are, right? I mean, when I was in college, there was a guy at my college who was a Jewish Zionist. And I remember there was this big controversy at my college because God forbid, the LGBT organization showed, believe it or not, an anti-Israel film. Oh my God. And it was like a very like liberal, moderate anti-Israel film. And it like had Noam Chomsky as a talking head in it. I think it was called Occupation 101. But it was like, there was so much anger. And I remember this Zionist guy at my college said, the people who made that movie would cut the heads off of every single person in the LGBT organization. I said, this film was made by Noam Chomsky. You think Noam Chomsky wants to cut the heads off of every single person in the LGBT organization? But that's how Zionists think. If you criticize Israel, you must be a head-chopping Borat, right? We killed the gay, we cut the head off, And it's like, it never occurred to him that like there were liberals who don't like Israel. There's like human rights activists. No. Everyone who doesn't like Israel is in Hamas, which means they want a Saudi government and they want to kill gay people. I mean, it's like, that's how Zionists think, right? I mean, it's just, if you disagree with them, and, they have the whole, like, every Muslim is, advocates Sharia law. Every Muslim's a Wahhabi. And if they say they don't, well, they're just practicing taqiyya. They really think that deep down. I mean, that's Zionism. I mean, that's how Zionists, that's the Zionist perspective, right? If you, they really do believe that. And so Borat is when you're watching Borat, it's funny, but you have to keep in mind, that's what Zionists think you are. Right. And that's the point of the movie. It's not just that they hate people from the former Soviet Union, not just that they hate Muslims. The point of the film is they think that's what you are also. That's pretty awful, isn't it? And that gives you a lot to think about. I mean, it's like, and saw Borat. I thought it was pretty funny when I watched it, but it's also like, shit, man. You know what I mean? Like they're talking about you. That's what they think. That's why they feel that Israel is necessary, because you are Borat. Think about that. They think you're Borat. It's pretty nasty, right? So there you go. I hope that was a useful answer, Tavis. I hope that was helpful. I hope that was helpful. If anyone else wants to send a question, feel free. I see there's a couple Rumble rants that have come in. And I guess Gabby is trying to send her question. You can just send your question. You can just text me your question, Gabby. If it doesn't go through, it doesn't go through. But there is another Buy Me a Coffee from David. He said, would you like to talk about George A. Romero's zombie films, which were a critique of capitalism? Did he make Night of the Living Dead? I watched Night of the Living Dead, right? Is that George A. Romero? George A. Romero, Night of the Living Dead. Yeah, he did. He did Night of the Living Dead. He did Night of the Living Dead. Night of the Living Dead, that film, it was a low budget film. And the house they filmed it in is like a tourist. It's in Ohio. It's in southern Ohio someplace. And that is like people travel to go to that house from all over the world. And it was definitely making a political statement. It's from the 1960s. And I mean, spoiler alert, but like, it's like the zombies, there's like a zombie apocalypse going on, and these people are trying to get safe from the zombies. And there's this kind of like very angry, white guy who's like, go down to the cellar, go down to this. Like the people are fighting over what to do. And they're in this abandoned house trying to hide from the zombie apocalypse. And there's an African-American guy, and he's the last one to live. And then spoiler alert, when the like vigilantes come that are shooting the zombies, they kill him, even though he's not a zombie. And it's supposed to be a poignant about racism, but he actually survived. He's the one who finally survived the zombie apocalypse, and then they just assume he must be a zombie and kill him. And that's supposed to be about like, racism. And it's like the posse that's going around shooting the zombies is like racist, sheriff, Bubba kind of, that kind of thing. And and so it's obviously making an anti-racist statement. And he's an African-American guy in this very rural area surrounded by white people. I don't know. It's it's in Pennsylvania. Oh, okay. I thought the house was in Ohio. It's Pennsylvania. Okay. Thanks, Ryan, for correcting me there. I knew it was somewhere around where I grew up, because I remember people talking about people driving out there and stuff like that. And that's a well-made film. And then the second one, I think it's called Dawn of the Dead, right? I saw that one. That's the one where they're in the mall, right? And they're in a mall. That one I thought was a bit pessimistic and anti-human, in the sense that like they're in a mall, and the mall has everything, right? They're able to live. The mall has food. It's got all this stuff. So they're living in like the luxuries of American consumerism. But then, spoiler alert, it's the bikers that mess it up, right? It's like they're hiding from the zombie apocalypse in a mall, and a mall has everything. And the message is supposed to be like abundance, like American, we have everything. But then these like stupid bikers break into the mall and are like riding their motorcycles through the mall, and they break everything open, and then the zombies come in and get them. And it's supposed to be like, we're stupid, basically. It's like our oafishness, our stupidity, our oafishness, our stupidity like gets in the way, like we can't be safe, basically. That's what I took from it. It was kind of, it's like the zombies are not the villains, it's us. And that seems to be in the first one, right? I mean, it's like, the racist sheriff posse kills the African-American guy. And then in the second one, like they're safe, they have everything they need in the mall. And it's like this tragedy of like, look at, it's like that whole thing about like, you can't take it with you. Like when you die, all your money gets left behind. It's like, like, look at all of our wealth. Well, the zombie apocalypse came, and so it doesn't really matter. But then we can't even be safe in the mall because stupid bikers come and like break the windows and are like, woo, and driving their motorcycle around, and then we're fucked again. Right. That's kind of what I took from that one. And that again, it's not really, the zombies are just kind of there. They're just kind of a fact of life, like a disease. But it's the humans with our oafishness, our stupidity. We're the ones who really mess things up. That's what I take from both of those films. If that's at all interesting. Oh, wow. 2 more questions have come in. Hey, keep them rolling in, folks. That's great. We got 2 more questions that have come in. 2 more questions that have come in. That's great. We'll keep going. If you want to send a question, the best way to do it is via Buy Me a Coffee. And I appreciate the people who sent the questions in. Good stuff. Get me talking, right? Good stuff. Buy Me a Coffee is the best way to send a question. So we got 2 more. So Kim in Ontario says, I'm a bad girl for throwing you this bone. One night, after our Trotskyist political work was done, I announced I'm going to the movies to check out RoboCop. There was an audible gasp, or was it stunned silence? I don't remember. But somebody actually came with me because they wanted to see what was up with me. I'm pretty easygoing, but secretly pleased that the movie started out with politically hardcore scene in South Africa. Another time I announced I'm off to see Clean and Sober with Michael Keaton. And that was controversial too. How could I? Toronto still had 5 repertory cinemas. Oh, that's interesting, Kim. I know you mentioned the political group you were in. I'm not going to say which one it was. You mentioned having been in this political group. I don't know how they are about movies. Different political groups have different attitudes. I mean, CPI, we don't care what movies you watch. We don't. But these communist groups, a lot of them have been very heavily persecuted by the FBI and by the government. And communism itself, as an ideology and a movement, kind of experienced great dramatic setbacks, in the 90s, 80s, and 90s. And so a lot of the groups got weird. And part of the getting weird was regulating things like that. Okay. My first encounter with that was I was around a Maoist group when I was in high school, and they were very anti-Bush, wanted to drive out the Bush regime. And then I saw the movie V for Vendetta, which is still one of my favorite movies. It's a great movie based on a 1980s comic book. And it's about, this neocon government that is rounding up and killing all the gays and Muslims and setting up a police state and like doing false flag terrorist attacks, and the people overthrow them. And they denounced the movie in their newspaper for promoting left adventurism. And I said, okay, I mean, that's a fair political critique, but it's still a good movie, right? And it's about all the stuff you guys are talking about the Bush regime and, and all that. Yeah, it's advocating individual terror or whatever is the solution, but it's still a really good movie. And they couldn't, there was this well, no, the party said it's a bad movie, and I wanted to watch it with them so we could critique it. And I had the DVD. No, we will not watch this movie. This is bad movie. And I was just like, oh God. And it was like, they were scared to watch it because they might watch it and like it, and then they'd be against the party line. And I was just like, are you serious? That's where it kind of disappointed me, right? I feel like, and their critique I didn't disagree with. Yeah, left adventurism was not the solution to Bush, but we should be able to watch the movie and talk about that. But there was this dogmatic, oh my God, and I really don't like when people are afraid to think. That's one thing I really don't like, right? I love all kinds of movies that I disagree with, right? That I just don't agree with politically. And it goes the other way too. I mean, this was an experience I had as I wrote a critique of the Harry Potter books. I wrote Harry Potter, Fairy Tale of the New Left. And I argued that Harry Potter is very much a 1960s radical piece, right? That J.K. Rowling's hero was Jessica Mitford. And, it was whatever. And that, it takes with it some of the baggage of the New Left. And that a number of people that were Harry Potter fans that I knew that loved the Harry Potter movies and were communists got really offended. And I'm like, why are you offended? Well, you're saying that my favorite movie is wrong. Well, I'm not. So what? It can still be a good movie. I mean, and it was so it's on the one hand, you got communists that are afraid to watch certain movies because they're afraid of the political line. And it's just well, you can watch it and disagree with its political line. What's wrong with that? And then you get communists that they like a movie, and then if you point out its political line, they get very defensive. And both of those are weird. The Workers' World Party that I was in, part of their getting weird was stuff like that. I understand that they were really opposed to the show Seinfeld in the 90s. They had protests against NBC studios, and members were in trouble for watching Seinfeld. Because I guess there's an episode of Seinfeld where Seinfeld burns a Puerto Rican flag. The Puerto Rican independence movement and Puerto Rican nationalism is a big deal in New York City. And I guess there's an episode where Kramer burns a Puerto Rican flag, a mob of Puerto Ricans chase him. And so they and I will say also, when I was in the Workers' World Party, there was kind of a weird thing. There was a certain black nationalist group in New York City that was protesting movies and protesting Broadway plays. And, they were doing it for weird reasons. And the Workers' World Party was supporting them. And there was actually a group of, there were some high school kids who were around the Workers' World Party who quit over it. So they made a play on Broadway about the Scottsboro case, the Scottsboro 9, which is it was a Broadway musical about it's a very famous case that the Communist Party organized around about the Scottsboro 9. These 9 African-American men, young teenagers basically, who were falsely accused of rape for having been in the same train car as a white woman. There was a Broadway play about it. And this black nationalist group protested the Broadway play. And they had rallies against it and all of that because they said it's not funny. Like that was their line. Well, it's not funny. The Scottsboro case is not funny. Our history is not funny. Or it was odd, right? And these high school kids, their school went to the play. And I remember they sat down with leaders of the party and they said, look, we would have never known about the Scottsboro Nine if it wasn't for this play. Our school went to see it. We learned that the Communist Party had fought against racism in the 1930s. This is stupid. Why are you protesting this play? This is dumb. And the party was like, well, that's what, this black nationalist group we're working with is doing. And you have to, and they were just like, well, we think this is dumb. And they were black too. They were not white. Right. And they just said, you know what, they got angry and they basically told the Workers' World Party, you're full of shit for protesting this movie. Or this Broadway play. And I honestly, looking back, yeah, I mean, it would be one thing if that was a widespread sentiment in the black community, they were offended by it, but it was just this one little like black nationalist group in New York City trying to get publicity for themselves, from what I understand. And these high school kids who were black basically told the party, we would never have known about the Scottsboro case. This musical is against racism. Our school went to go see this musical. We learned about the Communist Party and how they fought for black civil rights. This is dumb. This is dumb. And you want us to protest this musical just because this group? No, we're not interested. And that was, that was bold. And I remember looking back on it, like, yeah, there were weird things like that about movies and plays that, like, the other thing is there was a movie called Cold Mountain that came out around the same time. And it was a film about Confederate soldiers who deserted. They didn't want to fight in the Confederacy, so they deserted, and they went to this place called Cold Mountain to hide, so they didn't have to fight. And they were protesting the movie Cold Mountain. And they were making it sound like this is a film that glorifies the Confederacy and glorifies Confederates. And it wasn't. It was a film that showed the Confederacy as very bad, and it was about groups of white people who were so not for the Confederacy that they fled and they went to not fight. So it wasn't a pro-Confederacy film, but like their argument was, well, this film is supporting the Confederacy, or the heroes are Confederates. Yeah, but they're Confederates who refuse to fight. Like that was weird as hell. Right. And then I remember the quote that they had, like from one of the black nationalist leaders, is they said, this would be like a World War II movie that didn't show the Holocaust. And they said that this movie about the Civil War where the heroes were Confederate soldiers who ran away, right? It only had one scene of like a slave plantation. So it was like not showing what black people went through. And I thought, there are loads of World War II movies that don't show the Holocaust. Like most World War II movies do not show the Holocaust. So I don't know. I thought that was weird also. And that, and that there were, black teenagers who quit the Workers' World Party or quit associating with the party. I don't think they were members over that kind of thing. And so that was interesting. So, these kinds of things happen. I don't know why this group you were in, and I won't say the name. I know, I want to protect your privacy. I guess it was Trotsky. I don't know why they didn't like RoboCop, because RoboCop was considered to be it was like a critique of the tough on crime policies, right? It was like kind of a lampoon of tough on crime. I don't know what their issue was. Maybe you can say in the chat what their issue was with RoboCop. And I've never seen Clean and Sober with Michael Keaton. I don't know I don't even know what that's about. So I wouldn't be able to make a political critique of that. But it's interesting. I mean, different communist groups have different attitudes towards movies, right? And, some of them can be very, what do you call it? Dogmatic, I guess you could say, or, and I mean, I don't know, even when Slumdog Millionaire came out, there were Workers' World Party members who thought it was a good movie because it showed poverty in India. And I said, yeah, but the message is that capitalism is the answer. And I couldn't get them to understand. I remember getting very frustrated. I'm like, the message of the film is that free market, that people in India are backward and primitive, and capitalism is trying to save them. It's Ayn Rand, it's Atlas Shrugged, it's libertarianism, it's a pro-imperialist film. And they couldn't get that, right? And they were just like, yeah, but it showed poverty in India. And obviously, if there's poverty, you need to have a communist revolution. I'm like, yeah, but the film is not saying that. The film is saying that the poverty is caused by them being too socialistic and not embracing neoliberalism. And there were like a couple older Workers' World members that just couldn't get it. There was one who said that she was against the movie because she thought slum dog was racist, because, you should never call a person of color a dog. And I'm just like, okay, like, that's a fair point, but that's not like the film. If you actually engage with what it's saying, it's actually very, 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 very much against anti-imperialism. It's very, very, very pro neoliberal capital. And it was like there were multiple people I had that argument with, and I just couldn't get them to understand their critique of the movie. It's like so I don't know. That's one thing, is when people, again, it's kind of like, when people, they get rigid, right? They get rigid. I don't like that. But okay. But anyway, I hope that answered your question, Kim. Morozoka said, thoughts on Eyes Wide Shut in light of the current Epstein thing, as well. Thoughts on, I don't know what that is. The second one, Bong Joon-ho. Is that I haven't seen that one. Eyes Wide Shut, I did see. That is the last film made by, what's it called? That's the last film made by Stanley Kubrick. And it's about like a lawyer, a wealthy doctor who saves a woman's life. Like she's at a party and she's going to drug overdose. He saves a woman's life. And then basically he's got this beautiful wife, and he's, a well-paid, wealthy doctor who lives in New York City, but he decides to get naughty, and he starts exploring all kind, and he almost has sex with a prostitute, and he, and then he like goes to this like underground sex orgy or whatever. And, it's like he goes and dabbles in this like secret underground sex world or whatever. And, the message of the film, it's apparently based on a short story from Austria in the like 1920s or something. And it's about, there has existed, that when you talk about a sexual underworld, people that have orgies or whatever, and it's about like a group of rich people in Long Island or whatever. They have some kind of secret underground sex mafia. And there's some kind of secret underground society that has sex. Okay. So in light of the Epstein thing, okay. I mean, I think in Hollywood, the rich people are having wild parties all the time. I mean, I don't think, it's a little bit, the film makes it seem like it's like the Illuminati or like some kind of conspiracy thing. But I mean, I think rich people getting together and being crazy fucking rich people, and like literally crazy rich people having wild sexual stuff. I don't think that's a secret. I don't think they have to be secretive about it. The Epstein thing was that the women were underage, right? That's the issue. And there's people who claim, I know it's like on the internet, people who say that originally the movie Eyes Wide Shut was going to show underage women, but then they changed it to make it not underage women, or that Kubrick was killed, that his death was unnatural because he was revealing that there is this underground sex mafia among the elite. There's a lot of like conspiratorial stuff. I will say, I watched a few reviews of it after I watched it by conspiratorial people that said crazy things. For example, like there's the final scene of the movie, right? They're in a store, right? The doctor and his wife, he's kind of confessed to his wife that he dabbled in this underground sexual world, almost got HIV, went to this party, and, and he's like feeling guilty basically. And the wife and him are having a conversation, and they're in a toy store, and their kids like kind of are like in the background, but they're obviously not going to talk about sex in front of the kids. So while the kids are like in the other scene, the man and, it's Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, they have their conversation, and then the movie ends. And I watched this review, and they claimed that because the kids were like off the screen, that the underground Illuminati had kidnapped the kids. And I'm like, no, they didn't. No, they didn't. That's ridiculous, right? And it's like they claim if you slow down, there's like a man like in the background with the kids that you can see, and it's like the Illuminati like kidnapped their children or something. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. Like, and that's the weird thing. There is this, and that's why I get a little worried, right? I'm really liking Marjorie Taylor Greene. All the Epstein stuff needs to be 100% revealed. I know, but there is this internet culture of like trauma, I don't know what you want to call it, true crime and like trauma addiction, kind of, where people like go out of their way to trigger themselves. And they end up in this kind of alternate reality where like everyone's a serial killer and everyone's a pedophile and everyone's a rapist. And yeah, it's a little bit nuts, right? There's some people that they get really into this internet world where you can really, if you wanted to nowadays, you could watch nothing but, serial killer, pedophile, you could really just dive deep into nothing but true crime and all of that. And, you could really lose yourself and just getting yourself triggered all day long with nothing but predators and perverts and stuff like that. And that's a dangerous place to get to. Epstein is obviously real, and his crimes should be revealed. We should know all of that. And I don't know how Trump is going to get out of this one. I know Trump has ordered the DOJ to start investigating, has ordered the DOJ to start investigating certain Democrats that were tied to Epstein or something. I don't know how I don't know what's going to happen, right? And I'm just watching, and I'm watching, right? I'm not gonna jump the gun on this. I will say I was, first of all, YouTube is so. It's so ideologically driven. I've been watching Marjorie Taylor Greene. I've been watching. I'm anti-war. I supported the peace talks. So YouTube, the video, if you have it set to just bring videos. So they brought a video up, and it was like an NBC report, and it says now that Congress is thinking about releasing the Epstein files, all the Trump supporters are saying that the Epstein story is nothing to see. Oh my goodness. And it's like an official news report by NBC. I saw that, and I'm like, that's not true. The Trump universe is full of people that are mad at Trump for not releasing the Epstein files. And I saw that, and it was like this whole news story about how the Trump movement are all hypocrites because now they don't care about Epstein. And I'm thinking, there's a huge section of the internet right, of the MAGA right, that really is angry with Trump about that issue. That was completely dishonest. And also, what about the fact that Democrats never talked about Jeffrey Epstein until now, right? The very same people that are all over the Epstein thing, they would have told you Epstein didn't exist, all right, until it became part of the anti-Trump talking point, right? And that's true. Right? That if you brought up Epstein before, they said it was Russian propaganda, you're spreading conspiracy theories. Well, it's real. And Trump is in the wrong for not releasing it. And I don't know what he's going to do. And it's not looking good for Trump right now. I'll just tell you that much. I am watching this situation play out. And my position is release the Epstein files. That's my position. And I don't know what they say about Trump, and I not looking good for Trump. Let me just put it that way. And I don't know what's going to happen. Trump's approval ratings are very low, and I don't know what's going to happen. That's where I'm at this point. Yeah, so there you go. That's an important question. Now, someone says, I first saw Exodus 1966 in the theater when I was just out of high school. I didn't really understand the events which played out into the creation of the Israeli state. Have not yet had the courage to rewatch it. So when I was in high school, you're obviously much older than I am. The way I first heard of the movie Exodus was that I was in the marching band. And at the graduation, we played Pomp and Circumstance. I played the trombone, bum, 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 but when people walked in. And then when the graduates left, we played bum, 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 bum. And it was the theme song of Exodus. And I guess it was like, my mom said that must have been a joke. Like that was a joke that somebody made 40 years ago. It was like, oh, they're leaving, so we'll play Exodus, right? Ha 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 ha. But now it was just part of what we did at the graduation at my high school. So I was in the marching band, and we played for the graduation. So when the graduates entered, we played Pomp and Circumstance. And then when they left, we played Exodus. And we didn't think it was funny. It was just what you did. That's just what happened at the graduation ceremony. But I guess 40 years ago, somebody did it as a joke, and then it just caught on. That's what you do when the graduates are leaving. You play Exodus, and Exodus means leave. So, I don't know. But Exodus was written by a communist, right? Dalton Trumbo was a Communist Party member. But the CPUSA was pro-Israel until 1967. The CPUSA did not criticize Israel until 1967. I actually have Gus Hall's book, Imperialism Today. Yeah, it's right up here. Just got to reach up here. This is Gus Hall's compilation of Gus Hall, the Communist Party leader's essays on international stuff, right? It's called Imperialism Today by Gus Hall, right? Used copy, library discard, right? Imperialism Today, an evaluation of the major issues of our time. And it has the first like official condemnation of Israel by the Communist Party. And you read it, like I think it's 161. It's called The Middle East Crisis, right? All right. And it like the first paragraph is this very much like Israel should exist. Israel has a right to exist, but what Israel is doing is wrong. And you read it like it says, it's an open letter to the Israeli peace movement. I received your memorandum on the 6-day war and the part of the people of Israel in the defensive war for their existence. And that sentence lies the fundamental root of our disagreement. No matter how often it is repeated, an aggression does not become a defensive war. It was, after all, the armed forces of Israel that attacked Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. It is the armed forces of Israel that still occupy large sections of the Arab countries. It is the government of Israel that has taken steps to incorporate these parts of Israel. Public statements by the Israeli spokesman, leading religious political leaders openly declare Israel's intentions. It is therefore showing that the armed forces of the Arab countries attacked and crossed the borders of Israel. But you read it, there's a lot in here about like Israel has the right to exist, Israel, but Israel is acting as an aggressor aligned with U.S. imperialism, so we're against that, basically. There's a lot in here about like Israel is the aggressor, but we still support Israel. We think they have the right to exist, right? Right. Yeah, it's quite crazy. So, even in 1967, where they did finally criticize Israel, the Communist Party was pretty weak on that question. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the Communist Party program still to this day says Israel has the right to exist. Right? Let me see if I can find that, right? The Communist Party USA, do they still say that? I feel like they would have taken that off of their party program or something, just because it's a bad look in light of everything that happens. But let's see. I'm looking at their party program. Let's see if it still says that. It did at one point. Yeah. Right. Does it still say that? Palestinian people have the right of self-determination. U.S. support of Israel. No, it doesn't say that anymore, right? It doesn't say it doesn't oppose the existence of Israel, but there's no straight up like Israel should exist statement. That used to be the policy of the Communist Party, but it doesn't look like it says that currently, which is interesting. Which, I mean, that's good for them. I mean, it looks like they've come around on that issue, so good for them. But yeah, for a long time, the CPUSA position was this, pro-Israeli statement. So, interesting. So yeah, but yeah, Exodus. I have not seen the movie Exodus, but there's this apparently a scene in the movie Exodus where there's like a guy who's a Mossad agent, and he says something like, like sometimes, we need to motivate people, to understand that they should come to Israel. And it admits that it is true. In the 1940s, Israel carried out a number of false flag bombings that, to convince Jews from the region to move to Israel. They blew up a synagogue in Iraq and other places. That's proven. And in the movie Exodus, they acknowledge that. Right. It was just like it's portrayed as, well, sometimes we've just got to, encourage people or whatever. Now, though, if you say that, they'll call you anti-Semitic. But it was in the movie Exodus, and it's widely understood to be fact that, yes, Israel, in order to encourage Jews throughout the Middle East to move to Israel, they carried out false flag attacks. That is true. That the Zionists did carry out false flag attacks against their own people throughout the region in order to convince Jews from around the region to move to Israel. That is true. But if you acknowledge that now, they call you anti-Semitic, even though it was in the movie Exodus. So, John McCarthy, I always tell my other members that the children's cartoon movie Sing that my wife used to watch with our grandkids reminds me of you. The main character, Buster Moon, vows he's going to save an old theater by putting on the greatest show ever. All these forces and events try to stop him, but through bluff and buster and willpower and stubbornness and optimism, he pulls it off and saves and inspires a bunch of people. Wow, John. Well, that's really kind of you. I appreciate that. I'm going to have to go watch this movie. And I thank you. And that sounds about right. There is a lot of forces working against us, but with our optimism and our bluff and buster, we're getting through it. I'm going to have to go watch this. It's called Sing is the name of it. That's the name of this movie. This kid's movie. It's called Sing. I'll have to look it up. Buster Moon and the movie Sing. Going to save an old theater by putting on the greatest show ever. Well, that's very kind of you, John. I do appreciate it. And we're doing great stuff right now. We are going to put on the greatest show ever in January. So be there, register. It's going to be great. It's going to be an awesome, awesome event on January 11th. So go and register. It's going to be the greatest show ever. I'm very, very, very excited about it. Very, very excited about it, and it's going to be awesome. The hotel's reserved, tickets, people are registering. I'm figuring out getting people to town, and yeah, I really like it. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, and thank you, John. I do appreciate it. And yeah, come to our event January 11th. It'll be great. It'll be awesome. David Fox says, I highly recommend the movie Matewan as part of the history of struggle. Matewan, right, is a movie about striking miners, and I believe James Earl Jones, right, plays a black labor activist. There's like the scene. I might be able to show that on here, right? Where he says, "Don't call me no scab" or something like that, right? Let me see, James Earl Jones, Matewan. I might be able to show that scene where it's like somebody's racist towards James Earl Jones' character. And then he says, well, don't call me no scab or something like that. Right. Right. It's famous. Here, well, I'll see if I can put this scene on. If I can get away with showing this scene. I think I can, right? You have to be careful if you show clips, but I think you can put this on, right? Is this the one? It's a labor movie. Yeah. Here we go. Yeah. It's a labor movie, about miners. I've heard it's a bit of a pacifist movie though. Right. But regardless, yeah, it is a labor-oriented, pro-labor film from the 80s, right? From the 1980s. And James Earl Jones, that's the voice of Darth Vader. He is the main character in the film. So yeah, we'll put this on. Hold on. We just gotta, yeah, here we go. The Matewan, the Union speech from Matewan. Classic Hollywood film, right? All right.
Thing we got to have is all of these niggers and all these dagos that come in here to take our jobs thrown out of the mine.
Mine's hell. They got them in our houses. They're sitting at our tables right now, and they're sleeping in our beds while we're out living under a piece of canvas at the back of the holler.
I've been a union man my whole life. I know the story with these coal operators and their gun thugs. The only thing they understand is the bad end of a bullet. And if we show them, we just as soon blow up their damn minds as seen them work by a bunch of scabs, but then they gonna listen.
Someone's coming. It's Alex. You got someone.
Where'd you find him?
He come right up on the steps.
They told me that CE Live is where the union men's meet.
So?
I got business with the union.
That's so. What's your name, son?
They calls me Few Clothes. I didn't come here looking for no trouble. The men's got to eat.
So why don't you go eat back where you come from?
They told me that they was jobs here.
Go home, nigger. Goddamn scab.
You watch your mouth, Peckerwood. I've been called nigger. And I can't help that the way white folks is, but I ain't never been called no scab. And I ain't fixing to start up now. I go ton for ton loading coal with any man here. When I do, I expect the same dollar for the same work.
You get out of this holler alive, son. You'd be doing good for yourself.
Union men, my ass. You want to be treated like men? You want to be treated fair? Well, you ain't men to that coal company. Your equipment, like a shovel, a gondola car, a hunk of wood brace. They'll use you till you wear out or you break down or you're buried under a slate fall, and then they'll get a new one. And they don't care what color it is or where it comes from. It doesn't matter how much coal you can load or how long your family has lived on this land. If you stand alone, you're just so much shit to those people. You think this man is your enemy? Huh? This is a worker. Any union keeps this man out ain't a union. It's a goddamn club. Now they got you fighting white against colored, native against foreign, holler against holler. When you know there ain't but two sides of this world. Them that work and them that don't. You work. They don't. That's all you got to know about the enemy. You say you got guns. Well, I know that you all are brave men. And I know you could shoot it out with the company if you had to. But the coal company don't want this union. The state government don't want it. The federal government don't want it. And they're all of them just waiting for an excuse to come down and crush us to nothing. Fellas, we're in a hole full of coal gas here. The tiniest spark at the wrong time is going to be the end of us. So we got to pick away at this situation, slow and careful. We got to organize and build support. We got to work together, till they can't get their coal out of the ground without us, because we're a union. Because we're the workers, damn it, and we take care of each other.
How can we shut the mines down if we don't dynamite them?
The men walk out. All of them.
Fat chance.
And every man that walks out on his own steam, we take into the union.
All the Dagos and all the colored?
That's what a union is, fellas. You better get used to it.
So there you go. Yeah, right. That's a classic labor film. Now, Hemp Car sent a Rumble rant with a trailer for a film about, it's called Theaters of War, how movies are influencing, war propaganda. So we'll put that on, right? So yeah, it's fun. We just did a nice stream tonight about movies. And so here we go, Theaters of War.
Say you're a producer and you want to make a war film.
You would walk into the entertainment liaison office in downtown Los Angeles.
You say, I want to film an Air Force base, or I want an aircraft carrier, or I want some Black Hawk helicopters, or whatever it is.
And they would tell you straight away, give us your entire script.
And we've worked with Mr. Bay here since.
All right. Stream was interrupted. Yeah. Well, are we back? Are we back? Are we back? All right, very good. We're back. So it's not clear if it was Theaters of War or it was the movie clip, but yeah, there you go. Yeah, we're back. Ay. Yeah. So there you go. Stream was interrupted. I got notice. Your stream was interrupted. Copyright content was detected. So, all right. Well, we stopped. I mean, I don't know. Did it show the Matewan movie or was it the Theaters of War thing? Yeah, I don't know. It was Matewan that interrupted me. Okay, interesting. Well, whatever. Annoying. See, and it's funny because I found it on a channel. Often before I show a clip, I will check and see if it's on a number of different YouTube channels. But I guess that one was. I had something like this happen once before. I was playing some music, and they stopped me. Right. So you got to be really careful. So, all right. Well, there you go. Usually it lets me play stuff. It's just I'm not monetized, and so they get the ad revenue or whatever. But yeah. Oh well. At least I'm back, right? At least I'm back. I'm still streaming, so that's good. Annoying. All righty. Okay. So what else? Hempcar sent also an article in as a Rumble rant about the changing of the culture, movies being funded by the Pentagon, a list of films with that receive Pentagon funding. I'm sure it's more than that. I mean, it's direct. It's access is largely Hollywood movies. They give you access. Oh yeah. All right. YouTube demonetized me. That's why I have to do buy me a coffee. YouTube demonetized me. And so that's why views are down, is they don't promote the stream as much as they used to. And I noticed, well, that's a whole nother thing. I don't think YouTube views are real. I'll just be honest with you. I don't think they're real. I think the overwhelming majority of YouTube views everywhere are not real. So anyhow, wah. All right. Anything else on people's minds tonight? Anything else of concern to people? Anything else on people's minds? Anything else? Right? If people want to send in more questions, they're certainly free to do so. We have been on here for a couple hours. Gabby, she asked, Gabby's question: did you see a video of Trump degrading American workers on Fox? I didn't see it. No. Was it bad? I mean, I said Gabby said she saw it on Due Dissidence. Well, I'm watching the Trump situation carefully. He should release the Epstein stuff, and it doesn't look good for Trump right now. But I'm also, you just got to see how this plays out, right? Trump's only been in office for about a year, right? It's really not even been a full year since, it'll be a year in January. And that, it's been pretty bad. But we'll just have to see. So we'll just have to see. But, I'm watching this very carefully. There's pretty awful things about Trump, but who's going to replace him is my concern. Who's going to replace him? And what are the dynamics, right? I know a lot of people are making huge predictions. Oh my God, it's over and all that. He hasn't been impeached yet. We don't know how this is going to play out, and you got to be careful with these things, right? A lot of people just want to. That's part of the problem with the internet is that, and I see what Candace Owens is saying, and I see what Nick Fuentes is saying, and I see what a lot of Trump supporters are saying right now. But I'm saying, hold your horses, right? And that the internet wants everyone to just jump the gun and shout, "This is what's going to happen." You don't know that. Let's watch and see what happens, right? Watch and see what happens. That's my advice about the Trump situation, right? We don't know how this is going to play out. It doesn't look good for Trump right now. His approval ratings are very low. He's not been a great president so far in his first term. And now we have a situation where, the Epstein thing, and it doesn't look good for him. I'm not going to, there's no reason to, pretend otherwise. But that said, yeah. So there we go. Now, Richard, he bought a coffee and he said, thoughts on the movie Scarface. Haven't seen the movie Scarface. It's a movie about Scarface was the nickname of, what's his name? The Italian mobster in Al Capone. Al Capone, the mob's boss of Chicago. Who did the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. And there's a movie about him called Scarface. I haven't seen it. Right. And he eventually went to prison for tax evasion. That's how and he died in prison. Very famous mob boss and bootlegger, right? He sold bootleg alcohol in Chicago. And apparently the Communist Party USA had some relationship with Al Capone. Apparently their office was in the same building as Al Capone's office, and that there was some kind of agreement they reached, which is interesting. Gus Hall, apparently, when he was in federal prison, he met Machine Gun Kelly, the bank robber, apparently. Apparently, there is the 1930s was the age of organized crime. It was also the age when the Communist Party was quite large, and there was some overlap, right? Also, in 1935, Ethiopia was invaded by Italy. Fascist Italy invaded Ethiopia, and the Communist Party organized the black community to have a hands-off Ethiopia rally. They had thousands of people march hands-off Ethiopia, but the city of Chicago banned the rally because they said that it was what was it? It was Italian. It was offensive to Italians. The movie Scarface isn't about Al Capone. Well, that was his nickname. His nickname was Scarface. Scarface is about a Cuban cocaine mogul. Well, I haven't seen it. That's the problem. It's about Tony Montana, Cuban refugee. See, I didn't know that. I assumed it was about Al Capone. Well, that's interesting. So why did they call it Scarface? Scarface was the nickname of Al Capone. He had a scar on his face. Was not Scarface the nickname of Al Capone? Now I'm feeling crazy. All right, Scarface. Al Capone. Yeah, Scarface was Al Capone's nickname. So why would they make a movie about another gangster? See, I haven't seen the movie, right? I shouldn't talk about movies I haven't seen. Thank you, Susan. I do appreciate it. Dr. Susan Jacob. Are you a real doctor? I assume you are, right? Good to meet you, doctor. Dr. Susan Jacob. All right. There we go. But yeah, I have never seen the movie, and I knew that Scarface was the nickname of Al Capone, and now I feel dumb, I guess. There was a 1932 Scarface. Okay, is that one about Al Capone? My PhD, so not a real doctor, but I get the title. Well, that's sweet. That's sweet. Al Capone was the gangster who had the nickname Scarface, but I guess this movie Scarface that I've not seen is about a Cuban guy. So there we go. All right. Well, the Mariel boat lift was in the Carter administration, and it was basically Jimmy Carter said there's a bunch of people trapped in Cuba who want to leave. So we're going to arrange a boat lift for them to go from Cuba to the United States. And Fidel Castro and the Cuban government used it to empty their mental hospitals and to empty their jails. And also anyone else who just wanted to leave. They just said, you want to leave Cuba, leave. Right. And it was just a lot of people left Cuba, and that was a big moment. And it was supposed to be, it was a moment that ended up kind of being a win for the Cuban government. in terms of propaganda, right? The U.S. government kind of got faked out. I guess they thought they were helping all these dissidents get out of Cuba, and in reality, Cuba was able to kind of put a burden onto the United States, I guess. So I don't know. There we go. Who is worse, Gusanos or Iranian monarchists? Well, so here's the thing, right? Iranian monarchists are people that support the Shah, right? They even had a reality TV show about them, the Shahs of Sunset Park or whatever. And the Shahs of Sunset Park, and there are a lot of Iranians that are not actually, that are anti-government, but are not monarchists, right? You have the Mujahideen Khalq, you have various other like Iranian leftists. There are Iranian Zionists, like Jewish Zionists who hate the Iranian government. There's an anti-Iran lobby in America. The Persian, like the monarchists, the people that are supporters of the Shah, are a small minority of it, right? Or not a small minority of it. They're part of it, but they're not the whole thing. The Miami Cubans, that's a different story. The Miami Cubans are, right? The Miami Cubans are, what's happening? I'm seeing like there's some breaking news. What is this? Capitol sounds like a war zone. What happened? What's going on? Oh, it's Buenos Aires. There was a blast in Buenos Aires. Okay. I was wondering what city that was. And there was just a big blast in Buenos Aires. Okay. Very interesting. I'm back again. They took me off again. I went down again. They took me off again. What happened? All right. I'm confused. This is a strange night. No, they only took me off once. I think he's just behind. I think you're just behind, Mr. Wonderful. All right. Great stakes. All right. Oh boy. Yeah, this stream, we talked about movies for an hour, and then I answered some good questions, and then we completely got off the rails, and we tried to show a clip from a movie, and they froze the stream, and oh boy. Yeah, this stream has gone some interesting places. Yeah. There you go. But you asked about the movie Scarface and then who is worse. I mean, the Miami Cuban crowd tends to be worse because they are just kind of Cubans who don't like communism. Whereas the Iranian monarchists are like one faction of Iranians who don't like the Islamic Republic, but there's other factions of Iranians who don't like the Islamic Republic. Let me put it that way. They're different. Okay. I don't know, folks. This stream got weird towards the end. I probably should end it here before we got kind of off the rails. We were going great. We had a good opening about movies, and then we started answering questions, and then they stopped the stream over copyright issues on YouTube, and then it got crazy here, and Anyway, so thanks for being here. We're having an event in New Jersey on January 11th. Please register and come to the event. It's going to be a lot of fun. And it's going to be good. And I should go watch Scarface since it's not about Al Capone. That's all. That's about it, folks. I'm going to put on the closing music, and we'll be back tomorrow night for sure. Tomorrow I'm talking with Chris Cutrone tomorrow afternoon about Marxism. Not sure where that's going to be streamed. I think it'll be on his channel, but I'm having a chat with Chris Cutrone. And then I'll probably just do my regular stream tomorrow night. So got a CPI meeting tomorrow for members, and I'm talking to Chris Cutrone, And then, then we're doing our normal stream tomorrow night. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.
New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.